Good afternoon. So many of you know that Rotary International's new initiative is the global issue of human trafficking, and they are currently working to address that issue on a worldwide basis. This year, Roseville Rotary partnered with the Roseville Police, the Roseville Police Foundation, the Roseville Visitors Association, and Grace Church to fund 3 stings in the community here. So Julie Warren is going to tell us about our hands-on efforts from the Roseville Rotary that we've done to help this program, and then Chief Rick Mathwig is going to talk about what they've been doing. Chief Mathwig has been a police chief almost 10 years for Roseville. He's a graduate got a bachelor's degree from the Ridge State or Beavers, and he's got a master's degree from the University of St. Thomas. And then our other speaker is going to be Peter Wohler. He's the executive director for The Source. And The Source is a nonprofit that helps self-tracking victims get out of the lifestyle and get some help so they don't return to that. Through their Annex network of prevention, outreach, recovery resources, and transitional homes, they've established a model that allows partnerships with local organizations and contractor registrations who desire to make an impact in their own community. So, Julie, you want to come on up?
Thank you, David. If you attended the Flights for Freedom fundraiser this past Monday at Fenton Distillery, last Monday, you would have heard both the Chief and Peter speak along with Ramsey County Attorney John Choi. It was an eye-opening session, and we should be proud of the strong leaders we have in our community and in our state who work to combat sex trafficking on a daily basis. The Chief has said that Roseville is a first-rate suburb, and most of our 11 hotels have issues, some more than others. Most trafficking takes place in hotels with mostly adult females. Peter Wohler with The Source was such a powerfully passionate speaker, we knew we had to bring him into our club to talk. Working with the Roseville Police Department, we are taking a 3-pronged approach of education, enforcement, rescue, and recovery. Last summer, the state of Minnesota passed a sex trafficking prevention training bill for mandatory hotel training. Then Megan and I have met with management of the hotels and reviewed the training video, administered the test, and distributed the training posters. We had interesting discussions with all of the hotel properties, and some we would even call eye-opening. Following our Train the Trainers, the management teams are able to train the rest of their hotel employees. I now invite Chief Rick Mathwig to come up here to discuss the enforcement piece and results of the 3 sting operations, and he will be followed by Peter, who will speak to the rescue and recovery. Chief?
Thanks, Julie. So, 28 to 29 years in law enforcement with Roseville, and so that's where most of my experiences are from. But as Julie mentioned, for human trafficking with Roseville, it's mainly regulated to the hotels. And if you have one hotel in your town, you will have human trafficking there. You will have sex trafficking. I don't care if it's $59.99, like it is on one motel, or it's $399 a night that you might have a different one. There is human trafficking in all of them. And with 11 in Roseville, soon to be 12, and maybe a 13th here in the next couple of years, it will be evident in Roseville for a long, long time. So about a year ago, I think I was here thanking the Rotary for the $2,500 donation to the Police Foundation to start our human trafficking, sex trafficking details. And the 3 that we've conducted are on the storyboards back there by the water and the coffee. So, I would ask you to take a look at those boards. The first one is on the far right in September of last year, where with my department of only 48 cops in Roseville, with 16 million people that come to Roseville every year. Yeah, 16 million people come to Roseville every year. Got that from Roseville 2 weeks ago. And 500+ thousand to come to 11 hotels. There's a lot of people coming through Roseville. So we didn't have the people and the money to make overtime details happen on these details. They're rather labor intensive because there's a lot of security, a lot of traffic stops, a lot of intelligence that takes place. And we have been out of the sex trafficking and human trafficking details for several years. And by virtue of the Rotary's Gracious Foundation, among others, we've been able to afford 3 details, and 1 more detail will take place later this summer. And they've taken place at one of the hotels. that we don't even tell the hotel that it's taking place, because we don't want that information to leak out. We buy the rooms, the adjoining rooms, and the first detail we did back in September to get our toe back in the water as to what human trafficking is in Roseville, it was dedicated toward jobs. It was the men showing up to buy a female for sex. And that detail started in the morning and it ended in the evening time, and there were no less than 44 men in Roseville that day that wanted to purchase a female in Roseville on a typical Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon. No less than 44. Then our second detail shifted more towards working with Source, and Peter will talk about that. The off-ramp, so to speak, recovery and rescue is to work on the females that are in this horrible industry. And Peter will talk about in the lower teens is the national average to be a woman involved in prostitution starts when you're 12, 13, 14 years old. So what conscious decision did you have when you were 13, 14 years old to make a decision on what you wanted to do? So that's the human trafficking piece. So to get in there and work with Source to try and work with the females and give them an off-ramp to recovery towards what Peter will talk about, but holding the pimps, the guy that's getting most of the money out of it, and the Johns accountable as much as law will allow us to. And that was the second detail, and the third detail was just a couple weeks ago that focused on the same thing, the off-ramp to recovery. And Source is working out wonderfully with women that are involved in prostitution to give them a chance to get out of it. So we will hold people accountable as much as we can. And I talked about at the foundation fundraiser back last week ago, John Choi with Ramsey County Attorney's Office has done a great job leading Minnesota for almost 10 years now in human trafficking. And one of the things that they've done a great job on was first in Minnesota to hold a pimp accountable for trafficking a female. And the story I'll give you is she was, at that time, this was 5, 6, 7 years ago now that I think about it, she was a 14 or 15-year-old girl from Austin or Albert Lea, Minnesota, one of those two cities down the Iowa border. I grew up an hour west of Austin. She was trafficked. She was found by a guy up here in the Twin Cities. He trafficked her for sex in Chicago, and he was trafficking her for sex in Roseville, in the metropolitan area, with two, she was 14 or 15 at the time. When they were checking into it used to be called the Days Inn now, over by 35W and County Road C. It's now called Kean. It's owned by the same gentleman who owned it back 5 years ago. Two alert employees noticed there's something odd going on with that guy and her. How they were dressed, their interactions, they called us, a couple very savvy Roseville cops. All of our cops do a great job. These two cops did a really great job that night. Separated her and him, and had to work with her for almost an hour to finally develop the probable cause to make an arrest. His name is Samuel Kozar. Long story short, Samuel was serving 26 years in Minnesota prison for trafficking that female. So Samuel Kozar was one of the first prosecuted in Minnesota for this sort of offense for this length of time. Others have since done that, but I can commend John Choi and his office for doing that. So it is there. It is prevalent. And I will follow up with that story about the owner of Days Inn. Within 6 months of that offense, he fired those two employees. He fired those two employees. So they're unemployed after that. So we all have to work together on this horrible crime, this horrible industry. But I'll let Peter talk more about. But just, and I'll be back for questions at the end. But my transcending statement is, if you have one hotel in your town, you have human trafficking by virtue of sex trafficking in your town, no matter the dollar that it costs to rent that room. It's there. I'll talk, and let Peter come up and talk about the great work that Source is doing.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. I grew up in Brooklyn Park, North Minneapolis area. Spoken to Rotary clubs in that northwest corner, and Diana, a couple up north in Pelican Rapids, Detroit Lakes area as well. And I grew up in the northwest corner here, but I moved up my senior year and graduated from up north. And so I really appreciate the Rotary and all that you guys do, and really excited on just the Rotary as the whole organization taking on this subject. I want to start with showing a 4-minute video about Source Anti-Trafficking, we were able to be the victim resource coordinators for the Super Bowl that was here in 2018. And our role continues to be one of the things that we do in our partnerships with different law enforcement, and same with what we did in the operations in Roseville here, is to be the victim resource coordinators. We want to be aware of all the resources that a victim could possibly access in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area. And so we have different opportunities we have our own caseworkers, and we have a transitional home, and we have different programs. But there's such a vast amount of culture within women that have been victimized and come out of trafficking. And so a lot of times for us to connect women with the right resources, but also to stay in relationship as caseworkers to help them make the next steps, whether that resource was a fit for them, maybe it was just for a few days, maybe a few months, but also if they graduate from that, what would be next for them, and do that. And I call it old school social work, which in the 70s and 80s was a lot more common in county social workers, but is not as common as today. So there's more and more individuals falling through the cracks, but especially are victims of those who know trafficking. So I'd like to show this. Kathy, but just
Source Anti-Trafficking provides opportunities and empowers sex trafficking survivors to get out of the life and not go back. Since the mid-1990s, we've worked with homeless youth and teens in prostitution. In 2010, Source Anti-Trafficking was established. Since 2012, we've had over 35 women and children come through our restorative home. We've been active in outreach, worked alongside law enforcement, and had hundreds come through our seminars and trainings. Victims of trafficking come from all walks of life, inner city, suburban, and rural, and they are often groomed at a young age. Their experience includes domestic abuse, addiction, homelessness, mental health, and sexual exploitation. These barriers make it difficult to leave the life.
This past year, we have expanded and started doing weekly street outreach. When we first started going out, women were very unwilling to trust us. They didn't know how to respond to us as we brought items like food, clothing, hygiene packs. They would often just not be interested. Now that we've had a consistent presence out on the street, we have noticed a shift. The women now will come looking for us. One specific woman has come and looked for us pretty much every week that we're out there. She comes and asks for food and hygiene items. We often have a chance to pray with her. And now she has even began calling us and has asked to be part of our advocacy program.
In 2018, we were selected by law enforcement to be the Super Bowl victim resource coordinators. Large events like the Super Bowl increases sex trafficking. One of the highlights of the Purple Light Project was running an emergency shelter at Hope Community Church, where victims who were recovered were brought in by law enforcement, by other service providers, where we had created a safe place for them to be, where there was a bed for them, there were hot meals available. And this was all made possible by over 200 volunteers from 40 different churches who we had trained, made this all possible. It was an amazing time of seeing the church come together and communicate to the women that they care.
Through our online outreach, I had the privilege of meeting a woman who, when I first contacted her, felt like she didn't have any value or any worth. She actually questioned why I would even talk to her to begin with. Through the conversation, we decided to meet. After meeting with her, I was able to connect her with our case manager, who was then able to help identify what her needs were and to help provide resources to get her professional clothing so that she could get a job. This woman has now been out of the life and is doing really well.
It's been an incredible year as we've seen impact increase significantly. Major events like the Super Bowl increased trafficking both during the week of and going forward. Our goal with the Purple Light Project was for the Super Bowl and beyond. Being chosen as the Super Bowl Victim Resource Coordinator has allowed us to further relationships with local police, national law enforcement, and statewide service providers. These relationships are significant in the ongoing efforts of providing resources to survivors. One of our Purple Light goals was to increase our outreach efforts. Since the Super Bowl, we've been able to come in contact with more than 70 women monthly, and we continue to see this number grow. We've seen women gain trust, desire prayer, ask for resources, be involved with our advocacy program, and take steps to get out. Recovery resources for survivors continue to be limited in ratio due to the sheer number of women caught in trafficking. Our vision is that survivors would know that they have worth and value and that opportunities to get out are personally available. With your help, we are able to continue providing opportunities and empowerment to sex trafficking survivors to get out and not go back. Thank you for your support.
Apologize for that sound, but hopefully you guys heard some of that and a little bit of saw some of the pictures of what it looks like. I just want to take a few minutes, and I think one of the things that as we think of modern day trafficking, there's some incredible statistics out there. As we know that the average age of women getting involved is in their young teens. Minnesota is the #1 per capita of homeless youth in the nation, and those are individuals under the age of 21 who are on their own. And that's significant because we're not talking about children or youth with families, because if they're with families, they're with a parent or a guardian that's going to access resources to help protection. So this is primarily 14 to 20-year-olds who are completely on their own. Over half of foster kids before they're 19 will be homeless in our nation. Okay, and it kind of makes sense, unfortunately, right? When they turn 18, they're no longer wards of the state. They don't. I'm glad when I was an 18, 19-year-old, I had a safety net, right? Of going back home, to my parents if something went wrong. Well, if something goes wrong for these 18, 19-year-olds, they literally have nowhere to go. They'll end up homeless, and they'll end up being very part of the vulnerable population. It's said within 48 hours in the metro area here that when an individual homeless youth hits the street for the first time, they'll be approached by someone in the drug or the sex industry. So unfortunately, it is a big business. And stories like the Days Inn, that why would that owner fire those 2 employees 6 months later? Well, it was bad for business. Okay, and that's just the culture and the world that we're in. I was fortunate to go on a Sankofa trip 2 weeks ago. And that's a trip that goes through the south. I went from Atlanta, through Birmingham, Montgomery, Jackson, Mississippi, and Memphis to visit different civil rights and different historic slavery sites. And it was, more than I could take in. It was an incredible trip. But there are, as we talk about modern day slavery, sometimes that's confusing, right? Because why don't women just leave? We hear a few stories about women being chained in beds in basements, and that's very, very rare. It still happens, and it's still devastating, and it should happen. We got to be aware of that. But most of the time, no, women aren't chained up. So why do we call it slavery? And why is this such a significant problem? Why don't individuals just get out? Well, the opportunities are very low. And as I did the Sankofa trip, it was really interesting me a few things. Part of, slaves started coming into our nation in the 1600s. And we know about the Underground Railroad, right? Well, that didn't exist the first 200 years of slavery. So when an individual was a slave, it's like, well, why don't you just run away and go north? Right? That just seems to us, the same to me when I was a kid, that's just such an obvious thing to do. Well, there's ramifications. It was really hard. There was most likely you were going to get caught. And then your family was going to be taken from you. And there's going to be retribution. Or even, in the time after the emancipation, after, 1963, why, slavery ended. Why did some slaves desire to stay on plantations? And after the 12 years of Reconstruction, then when the federal forces left, it was devastating for people of color down south. Well, why was that? Again, it was a cultural thing. individuals realize it would be easier for me to stay on this plantation, be treated like a slave, work here for pennies. I can at least be with my family. I can, if I try to leave, there's all these other things that are going to happen to me. And when you talk to women that are victims, they're normal, okay, it's hard for us to even imagine. And so just because there's opportunities that are there, doesn't mean that if me or you are in those situations, doesn't mean we automatically do that, because we don't see the hope and the value. Most women are in such a state of having such low worth, such low value, that they've been told this all their lives. They've been abused by authorities many times in their own home. For them to start to trust that someone would actually help them, right? That would meet them and say, we have an opportunity for you. And when they're told by the person that's providing for them, right? They're you could say plantation owner or their pimp. What it's going to cost to break away from that, and they've seen other people try in their own shoes, right? And maybe they have at different times tried. And so part of what we're looking at is just right now, I think of those cultures at times, before the Underground Railroad even existed. For someone who was in that history, as a person of color wanting to escape and figured they have no hope. But what could they possibly do? Or even in that time after the laws were changed, but there was still this incredible time, of what was happening, especially down south. That made living, such in those circumstances, and even the individual's deaths. And so part of right now, I believe that this is the time of history we are for trafficking. The culture has changed a lot in the last 10 years. And both with the law enforcement, the legislation that's happening right now is a very encouraging thing. I started working with homeless youth in the early 90s. Started out in Brooklyn Park. I actually went to college right here at both Northwestern and Bethel. One at a time, not together. I crammed that 4-year degree into 5 years. I ended up working with Honeywell as an engineer and overseeing the mission group, working in Amsterdam, cities in Europe and in India, been introduced to brothels, to the situation with homeless youth. Came back in the mid-90s, started working with homeless youth right here. And at first I wanted to work with at-risk kids, at-risk teenagers. I'm doing YMCA programs in my mind. YMCA does a lot, by the way. But if you start working with homeless youth, at-risk teens in our city, teens and prostitution will be a big part of that. And I got introduced to individuals who are in that age bracket of 14 to 20 trying to fend for themselves. Trying to make positive choices, but when you're homeless and trying to make positive choices and you don't have resources. So that's kind of how we cut our teeth in doing that. Part of our heart is to come alongside and not to be a standalone, but come alongside the shelters, come alongside law enforcement, connect the resources, and also come alongside the community at large. At I call it the brewery benefit. I'm not sure what the exact term was. The microbrew benefit, which was wonderful. I shared just a little bit on how you guys got to be proud of the Roseville Police and what they're doing. Because my experience, and we've seen this here and there, but that detail that we did, and I got to be a part of the last one as far as part of the advocate group, for us to be a part of that, the way the officers treated the women, to get to the point where you can sit down with a woman that's in this situation, whether they're 15, whether they're 20, whether they're 30, whether they're 40. Okay, they've been in it for years. A lot of times it's generational. We've had young women in our transitional home that was pregnant at the age of 19, and one of the things that she shared is her family was very disappointed in her. Her family was very disappointed in her because she got pregnant, and she was the major breadwinner at the dance clubs and by servicing men. So she could no longer be the breadwinner for that family. Ugh. That was just a shocking gut to me. Her mom was a woman that was involved in prostitution. Her grandmother was. it is at times generational. And what's also even sadder, when you hear the stories, and just this, look up Fox News this weekend, May 11th, they put out one of their headline stories, was about trafficking and the realities. And how individuals, the predators, are looking for vulnerable women, looking for the ones that are awkward, the ones that don't have friends. A lot of times, 20, 25-year-old men will come and pose like a boyfriend to a 16, 17-year-old, dote on them. You know, almost like a modern day dating situation. And through that relationship, get them involved in drugs, get them involved in situations, make the acts of sex more and more normal. It's a brainwashing. And so the opportunities that we have, I want to make sure, I'm going to spend a few more minutes, I'm going to open up some questions. For us to get to a place to sit down across from a woman, okay, and with a combination of different advocates, and like when I was a part, I've been on both sides of the stage with Johns. I've done the same things with being an advocate for Johns, also being an advocate for women. But our lead advocate in those situations is a woman that is a survivor, that has a lot of experience, that is over 50 now, and so she really is kind of like a mother hen. And we're able to say, you know, basically, you know, we are here, and in this operation, it's very significant for the police to also say, we're not going to arrest you. And that alone, and not just that, but just how the police treated them with dignity and respect, was a very significant thing for these women. Because not just the police, but a lot of these women have not been treated with that respect and dignity because they feel they have no value and worth out of our culture and society. But then, after that time of being questioned by the officers to come in and meet with our advocates and say, we're not part of the police, but we're here to help you. And the goal of this operation wasn't to arrest women, right? It was about freedom. It was about helping rescue them. That to me is just, you know, that doesn't do anything for the chief's arrest numbers. Okay? I'm pretty sure he has to report them some way, shape, or form, and that's a significant thing. That's a part of his job that you know that he gets judged on. So this is a significant thing, and for us to sit down and tell the women, you know, we're here to we help women, and a lot of times we speak in third person because if you start speaking in first person, lots of defensive go up. Actually, the first woman that we met with was from Vietnam, and she pretended like she did not know English. She would answer certain questions, so we knew she knew English, but we didn't make a big deal of that. But we would talk about how that we help women, and our concern is for women that are in situations being exploited and for their safety. You know, I would be introduced, I have my credentials as a pastor, so I'd be introduced as a pastor, and so I always say, we want you to know that God doesn't scorn you. And, you know, and if we get into the conversation, you know, whatever your background is, whether it's Christian, whether it's Islamic, whether it's Buddhist, whether it's Native American spirituality, whether you're an atheist, you need to know that God doesn't scorn you, but he actually has a plan of hope for you and a life of healing that he would like to see you have. And that's very significant because most of these women are coming again from a place where they believe God hates them. Okay? And then we talk about how we've helped women. We've helped women in your situation get out. And our advocate who's a survivor talks to them from her own personal experience. She also talked about how tough it was on her own kids. 3 of these women that we met with in this detail identified as single parents. So connecting her at a mother level. And then lastly, we let them know they can contact us. And if there's a time when they want to come and help, that we can provide help to them, or we can provide small helps to them, whether it's even for a meal or for a ride, or some type of help with a job for the day. But also, if they're in a situation where they want to get out, we can help with long-term planning with that as well. And so this has been this was a great opportunity, but more and more as we see both with legislation, law enforcement, but also the culture. And we talk about, I'll end with this, I'll open up some questions, recovery resources. And this is what I want to leave you with. So the idea of recovery resources is a chemical dependency term. Actually, we adopted it from that as recovery capital. But this is a simple idea, okay? For someone who's an addict or a victim, a lot of times victims of trafficking, there is drug addictions involved. A lot of times there's single moms involved as well. But someone who's coming out of an addiction or victimization or both, okay? They go through a season of treatment, safe house and then treatment, right? I think most of us are very familiar with treatment. And it's a season that's very structured, that helps individuals understand why they got into this in the first place, give them some good helps of stability, give them some understanding, right? But after that season, they end up returning, and the hope is they return to a community that's supportive and encouraging, and they have opportunity for education and career. And that's what's called recovery resources. I know people that went to treatment 30 years ago. After treatment, they had a family waiting for them that was going to be supportive of their sobriety, but also they had a job waiting for them. Now, when individuals don't have that, two things recovery resources are: community of support, encouragement, opportunity for education and career. When they do not have that, what happens? They return to what they know best. They become repeat offenders. In the criminal world, that's what we use that term, or they become repeat victims. So they end up in the same neighborhoods, sometimes the same home that got them there in the first place. And so that thing of recovery resources, Chief has one place to take people. That's jail. Right? So that's how it's set up. Okay? But he relies on the community at large to figure out how can we provide recovery resources. You know, he's doing his part in trying to figure out rescues in that first part of getting them into a place, get them in contact with resources for the next step. But now the community has to set up, right, and provide those recovery resources that that person has no. And there's very few of them, and that's where we are right now. You know, we're at that place where, yes, it's illegal, we've become aware of it, the Underground Railroad is kind of there, okay? But for women to hear that for the first time, it's a foreign concept. And they need to hear it again and again. The culture of that needs to change more and more. They need to know women that have gotten out with their kids and they've been successful. Because right now, almost every woman we talk to, they're coming from a perspective, why would I do that? And they don't even believe, like, why are you here helping me? In fact, most of them, I don't believe we're not going to arrest them, right, until they get back out on the street, just because that's their background. I wanted to just save a few minutes for questions, and so I wanted to open up the floor to do that if anybody has any questions.
Can I just add some comments?
Yes,
please
do.
Oh,
Be aware, they're filming you.
I just wanted to point out, I know a lot of times you're talking about girls and young women, but boys are absolutely victims of trafficking and exploitation as well.
Can you introduce yourself for the station?
Oh, I'm Mary McRoy. I'm the senior program manager for a shelter through 180 Degrees Brittany's Place Shelter, and we are licensed to. Can anybody hear me?
Girls ages 10 to 17, and I know as he was sharing, 12 to 13, you would not believe the number of 10-year-olds that we get in, and we just discharged someone this weekend who was 10 and from 0 to 3 was sold by her parents into the sex industry and pornography and things like that. So very real for males as well. Also talking about the hotels are the big hub for where it happens. Malls are where the traffickers can spot oftentimes these girls. I saw a thing with a trafficker could walk into a mall and be like, her. So being very aware of the malls as well. So.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, and I do want to give kudos to the coastal police for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mary Jo McGuire, Grants County Commissioner. So we have a really huge vested interest in our community providing for these people that are trying to get out and resources for these homeless youth. So I have a couple of questions, and they're probably long, but you can pick. I mean, first of all, you mentioned Minnesota is one of the largest, or one of the highest in number, and I would just ask why that is, but then what can we do as a community? I mean, I know as a county we're trying to always be providing services, But, you know, what can we do as a larger community then to help with this? I mean, you mentioned some things, but could you be a little more specific?
Sure. Homeless youth is the number one per capita. We're number 3 total in the nation. Why that is, you're probably familiar with the term Minnesota Nice. I don't know if you're familiar with the term Minnesota Connection. That comes from the early 70s, and that was the idea that there was many blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls who would get lured to the coast, to New York, Vegas, Los Angeles, with stardom of being in the music or movie industry. But once they were there, they were in some dire situations, and the individuals that lured them there would get them into prostitution. And why that connection is there, I don't know. But why, we are an urban area. Most homeless youth will be attracted to an urban area. Now, there's Chicago to our east, but to our west and south, and we see kids from Winnipeg, as well. Not trying to diss Bismarck, North Dakota, but there's not a lot between us and Seattle. And so we will see kids from 5-state, 10-state area be attracted to the metro area here. So I think that has something to do with it. Homeless youth are very mobile. We go down to Florida in the winter. A lot will gather in the Ocala forest in the wintertime, probably for obvious reasons of weather, but we will have a kitchen out in the woods. So that was, and also New Orleans used to be, they tried to get rid of a lot of the homeless youth during Mardi Gras, but we used to do that as well because there was just different connection points, and we would see those same youth in Minneapolis, or they would contact us. And we'd be the only individuals they knew could help them, with that. I think you talked about, so what can help? The 3-pronged thing of legislation, rescue, education. Did I say that right? And I think, one of the challenges me and the chief are talking about is just the education piece. How do you, and there's some simple things. We have different staff members that have written curriculum for confirmation classes. And we've spoken in different schools. Now, it's still a pretty hard sell to get in, and it's kind of obvious, right? It's church leaders, educators. This is kind of a scary topic. It's going to cause a little unrest, right? It's a dark topic to talk about. It's not an easy thing to talk about. But in our presentations, we make sure they're very age appropriate. And the reality is, when we have 10-year-olds, the average age is young teens, right? So the average age is somewhere between 13 and 15. That means we do have 10-year-olds and younger. And it is part of being a global culture, unfortunately. But I think that thing of figuring out more awareness, figuring out more ways to talk about these issues, to make people aware. And again, I just went on the civil rights thing and just realized some of the strategies and the different decades, how awareness was raised and what really was happening. And without that awareness of really what's happening, that was a big piece of changing culture, not just the laws, but also culture. And so I think a part of that is, we hope to do a seminar here in the fall in the Roseville area. We're going to do a 5K event that also, I'll do a little plug for it. Also, we have a walk, but it's a walk in her shoes. So men, we try to find stilettos that fit your size and find a walkway. I prefer the walkways that are right next to grass because I cheat. I walk in the grass because then the stilettos can dig down deep and don't ruin my arches for 3 weeks. But that's me. Some say I cheat at that, but anyways, but that's kind of a fun event. But it also that's a piece of making awareness is just putting a spotlight on the issue, but also just making the issue like we've done drug awareness, right, with our schools and our teens, and make them aware of the realities of that, and that sometimes happens at a very young age as well. But it's the same situation. It's a dark, scary subject. But it's something, this is right here, right now. This is on our watch. Even though it might not be my kid and my family, this is in every public school, every county are you turning me off here? In every county, must be time, every county in Minnesota, right, there was arrest this last year. It happens every year. And so.
I'm wondering too about strengthening resources for school-age kids and for kids in foster homes. One of the things our company has participated in through one of our employees became aware of it is something called the Real Project. And it's a woman that just makes these marvelous videos for kids that need, foster kids that need to find homes, often in the 8 to 12-year-old range. And she goes around to churches all over the state, and she has had 1,600 adoptions due to her project. And it is just makes you cry to talk to her. She has just like 2 people with staff, a wonderful videographer, but these just heartwarming videos, because finding homes for these kids is a big way to help, I think. And we thought her project was just phenomenal. And one of our employees had worked through his church, and their church, and some people in their church ended up adopting 2 of the kids that she had on the films and things. So and working in the schools, because a lot of these kids are pretty smart and independent too, but making them aware too of what to look for, because you drop your kid off at 12 or 13 or 14, you need even parents, real parents, and what to, is that danger stranger, but what to look for.
Well, and part of it, truthfully, our young 14, 15, 16-year-old boys need to know, how to respect a woman. And it might seem simple, but a lot of them, no one's ever told them that this is wrong. Just that, sometimes that simple, basic message. I'm amazed at how much of our culture our kids haven't heard that. They've heard a lot that it's right, and it's put up on a pedestal with a lot of cultural things that are happening. I better stop talking. Okay.
Approach a victim. What is the success rate in getting them into a program?
Oh, that's a tough call.
Yeah.
I tell you, it's not very high. We have to contact about 100 women on our online things to get 2 or 3 results as far as women contact us in the back. Now the positive thing with that, we do it 1,000 times, right? We'll get 20. And I said the first step is really having that conversation. But in our transitional home program, we've had since we're 7 years now, and we've had close to 40 women, 8 of them single moms, come through a 6-month to 18-month program, before that. And so it's all over the range. And again, it's all over as far as just the cultures, whether we're individuals that are immigrants to individuals that are college educated, and with that. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much, and I would like the chief to come up also. And let's see, Lauren, you're going to take where should we stand in front of you? Okay, I just want to thank you both for speaking to us today. And we plant trees in Rotary Woods for you in honor of our speakers, and we also have a 4-way test coin with the Rotary 4-way test on it for you to remind you about that. And we certainly appreciate all this, and it's wonderful. I mean, it makes me proud to be a Rotarian that we are involved in such a great program as you both are representing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.